This story of Martha and Mary, of course, we read these readings sequentially. Every week we have one, and it comes around every week, every year, once a year. And it's a very classic story. And it's basically bringing up concepts of work versus service, service versus inner communion. And it's not meant to, it, it is meant to make a distinction between what is work and what is service, but it's not meant to make a distinction between what is service and serving and that time we spend with inner communion. As it says in Swami's reading, we don't know what Jesus actually said to Martha, but the point was that he didn't object to her serving. It was the attitude in which she was doing that service. And as he said, Mary has chosen the better part. And I think this is an important message for us to take to heart at this time, because all of us are being called to service in many different ways with the situation with the COVID, the virus, the difficulties that are being felt throughout the country and actually throughout the world. And it can't help but affect us in some fashion or another. And it's calling us, whether we like that call or not, we're responding to it. It's calling us to reach out and to be helpful and to be a channel of service in some way. But it's here in this reading, we're being reminded that what is true service? How do we serve? And to really serve as opposed to work, or in Martha's case, what was Jesus was telling Martha that she was busy. Essentially, he was saying that she was restless. She wasn't, in a sense of just activity based upon one's inner restlessness. And actually, you could say even go further than that. You could say any activity that is done without the consciousness of God communion is ego motivated to some degree. There's ego involved in that. And so Mary, in a sense, was communing, but Martha was seemingly very, very busy, seemingly doing very good work, but it was out of a restless nature. And you could even see that the attitude was wrong, because she says to Jesus, more or less saying, Christ or Jesus, get my sister to help me here. And she was a little bit disgruntled about it. She was a little bit bitter. And so you can tell just in that attitude that she approached this. And you've heard this, of course, people don't, as people will say, I'm doing all the work. Why don't you get up and help me? And of course, there's that story of Swami Kriyananda once when he was feeling a little bit wanting Master's attention, and Master was in the other room in a meeting, and Swami was in the adjacent room doing some little errand for Master. And Swami says because he felt he wanted Master's attention, he started to make a lot of noise in whatever the chore he was being asked to do. And of course he realized it was very silly to do that, because he was very new as a disciple. But you see this attitude that they're not really serving, they're being busy and they're restless. And we don't want to be that way. Now, I'm not denigrating outward service, even to the fact that it is, perhaps you could say, below God communion. I mean, after all, we all have these ego natures until we're in a state of enlightened freedom. But yet, we can take it a step by step, and to the degree that we can purify that service by bringing God into it and trying to be a channel for God and not just an expression of our own likes and dislikes and restlessness. To the degree we do that, we ennoble the service. And the more our service is ennobled, the more it purifies us. And we, through that, even though it's not purely in a state of God contact, nevertheless, we need to do that because through that, we begin to grow. Now, there was a story in this regard. Swami was making a point of this very concept, where years ago he was in, I believe it was in the UK. He was in somewhere in England, I imagine, and he was in the UK and he had been invited to a conference of religious leaders, people who were active in religious activities, and the various people they were all asked to speak. And one fellow got up immediately before Swami was about to speak. And this fellow was, I believe he was from the Church of England. He was representing that denomination. And he was very, very forcefully saying, religion in the modern age needs to be in the streets with the people, uplifting and solving problems, and not, in the making the comparison the old way of spending one's time in prayer. We need to be active, and it's a true expression of what religion should be in the modern age. Social upliftment, and so everybody, they clapped, and yes, that sounds good. And then it was Swami's turn to speak, and and Swami says, it's very discourteous for somebody such as myself to contradict another speaker, but I have to say something because I don't agree with what my predecessor here has said. He says, each of us has a divine duty that may be unique for each of us, but it must come from, if we are inwardly, through our attunement, our God attunement, and God asks us to serve in some way that is special for us, we need to attune to that. What is our proper, each of us, our proper thing to do? And that may be a life of contemplation. That may be a life of prayer. And those are as valid as, or perhaps even more valid than those lives of service, which also can be appropriate for some people. So it's not so he went on to say, this is not an either or thing. And we must remember, and of course this story of Martha and Mary, that Mary has chosen the better part, not because she was not serving outwardly, but she chose the better part because her first duty was to be in communion with God. And with that communion, then God's guidance comes to us. What is it the right thing for us to do? How do we express that God communion? And then we take it out. And so any action that is done in a state less than God communion is a form of restlessness. But done in God communion, it becomes a form of love. Because what did Master or Swamiji said? Swamiji said, we're all seeking bliss. And bliss in motion is what love is. Love is bliss in motion, or joy in motion. So if we want to serve, and to serve perfectly, we should contact that joy. Contact that joy, and if it's our dharma, our guidance, we put that joy into motion. And that's an expression of divine love. Reaching out to other people, be a channel for that joy, to be a channel for that. Reaching out to others. So that's must pick up the puppet by that proper string, and then everything else will fall into place. Not just be restless and out of God attunement. Be active, but in God attunement. Because you see, just as the Gita says, we must be active. There's no such thing as inactivity. But what is our action? That first action is to be in one with God, to serve God. And then our dharma, each one of us, be true to our dharma and go out and share that. If that is our dharma, really to share, to reach out to others. And certainly, if you're in doubt, to serve is a proper course of action for everybody. It's ennobling. It's purifying. But especially so if we do it in the right consciousness. If it's not done in the right consciousness, it's just one more karmic thing that'll come back, and action and reaction. But now a counter story, you could say that yeah, I have to mention in balance of this because you say, oh, we should be like Mary, something needs to be done or be in contact with God. Yes, I say, yeah, that's what is being said. Be in communion with God and let your action flow from that. But this one, the second story is also a lesson here. Then this was in 1969, long time ago, when I first uh, came to know Swamiji the year before, and he asked me to come help him start a meditation retreat in the Sierra Nevada mountains, which is not far from where I'm right now, not this property, but about 7 or 8 kilometers from here. And and that property's still there. And one night in the summer of 1969, Swami and there's not many people there during the week, and there were maybe half a dozen of us, five or six. And we were sitting around the dinner table after dinner, and Swami was talking, and we were sharing just as people do. And it was a nighttime, and it was summertime here, dry season. A fellow runs in the door and comes in really quickly and says, come, quick, 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 we have a fire. And a fire, that's very dangerous here in the mountains, and especially in the summer dry season. So everybody jumps up, Swami included, and we all jumped up and we ran down. And this was a time when Swami could run too. All of us ran down the hill to where there was a cabin. That a couple of fellows had built this cabin, a very nice little cabin. It was on fire. The wood stove had got the fire. And the cabin, of course, was surrounded by the forest. But we ran down there and we said, oh my God, I could see right away that we were not going to save that cabin because it's become fully engulfed in the flames. But we had to stop it because the fire could catch the forest on fire as well. So we grabbed whatever implement or tool we could, and we began clearing the brush from that, and getting some people run to get hoses, water, and whatever we could do to keep it from spreading. Well, one of the fellows that went with us down the hill, when he says, "Oh, quick, let's get to work," and we were all very energetically trying to prevent that fire from spreading. But he came up with the thought. What he didn't do any of that. He went to the side, sat in the lotus posture, and he started chanting Om. Oh, that was his contribution. Om, Om. As I remember, because it was right there in front of me, and Swami Kriyananda walked up to me. He said the person's name. He says, "What are you doing?" He says, "Get up. That's not the time to be saying that. And our job right now is to prevent the fire from going into the forest. Get up." And now this fellow, it was a naive young man, but like Mary, I'm going to commune. I'll bring the divine presence. And maybe that divine presence will somehow cause the flames to go down. Now, actually, that could be possible, but this young man, did he have the power to be able to invoke that power to be able to make that happen? Had he made contact with God enough that the divine force of Divine Mother was going to listen to him? No, it was inappropriate in the moment. So Swami was saying we have to be appropriate to the moment, but we can fight the fire and not lose our centeredness, and which we did. Swami was there. He was not, he was perfectly centered, and we went about it. And all of us tried to maintain that in the moment of crisis, you might say. But he was right there, and that's what he was saying. We must act in the right way, the appropriate way, according to the level of our own inner understanding of what that is. And it may not be exactly the same for everybody, but we do need to act. And so here all of us are faced right now in a situation. We have this COVID situation. We're being tested and we're being asked to act. And it's going to be appropriate for some to act in one way, some to act in another. If you're a doctor, you have that. And if you have the ability, the time, some to give prayer to invoke the Divine Mother's presence. And all of us can do this in one way or the other, but the critical element in this is not out of a state of restlessness. We must be, to be effective, to share that joy, which is the true healing power, is to share joy with other people. Joy is what heals, because joy is a form, an expression of God. God heals. God is the healer. Divine Mother is the healer. And we are here to do her will. We're here to do Master's will. We're here to be instruments of that and to act according to our individual dharmic duty of whatever that might be. But you don't look left, don't look right to what another person is doing and say, well, that's what I should be doing, or that's what I should be. Do what you think is appropriate and you feel guided to do that's useful and that's helpful. And it'll vary from one person to the other, but act and be a channel for that divine presence in you through God communion. And I'm sure there are some people, the best thing you could do is to pray and be in communion for other people. And that may be the highest thing to do. That may be the thing for you to be, even to meditate. If your yogi power of deepening of your meditation can bring God and serve through you to other people, that may be the right thing for you to do. But with that, and I think for most of us, we are those, because most of us are active people, is to contact that joy, be a channel for that joy, and then let it flow through us. And in a sense, joy in motion is divine love. And we can express that love through our help in whatever way is appropriate for each one of us. So this is in a sense of what is being said here with this parable or this analogy of the Martha and Mary story. But I like to think of it also, there's another element to it. Well, actually, there's two other elements to it. And one of them was, I remember it's a story that Swami once told. He related something that he had read, and I thought about it in this regard, is that he had read a manuscript that was written from the 10th century, and this was in a Christian manuscript, and it was a conversation it was a question that was posed to an abbot in a monastery. And one of the monks asks the abbot, he says, so what should I do if I'm uplifted into a state of ecstasy and the bell should ring to call me to communal prayer? And the abbot answered, he said, you should remain in that condition to which God has called you. The purpose of prayer, whether private or communal, is to bring you into closer communion with God. Well, I think all of us would say, yeah, that makes, that's certainly true. But then the point Swami went on to make, he said, but then Swami said he read a second quotation by a modern day, 20th century at that time, abbot, where the same question was posed to that 20th century abbot, and the abbot replied very differently. That abbot said, what you receive from God is yours to enjoy in eternity. Meanwhile, here on earth, your first duty is to obey the monastic rule. Very different. And Swami made that point. He says how things have changed. They've lost the spirit of, that abbot has lost the spirit of what Christ came to teach us. And this, I bring this up, is because one of the missions of our Guru, he came into the world to revive, to show the unity of East and West, and universalize the basic teachings of Eastern religion, Western religion. But he didn't say with modern Western Christianity in this case. He said original Christianity, original yoga, teaching the same. And that 10th century abbot had it right. And Swami said Master came, and one of his duties is to revive world over, not just in the West, that spirit. Our first duty is to serve God. And if you're called up into ecstasy, that ecstasy is you stay there. Master in his ashram was clear about that. He said, "Where is so and so?" One of the monks, and another monk said, "Oh, he's meditating." And Master said, "Oh, don't disturb him. That's right. That's good. Do that." But I should also mention, remember when Sri Yukteswar called Yoganandaji's, our guru, up to his bedroom upstairs at his ashram. He's Mukunda, and no answer. Mukunda. Mukunda was sitting downstairs at the altar trying to meditate, and finally, after the third time, he answers, "Sir, I'm meditating." And Sri Yukteswar says, "I know how you're meditating, with your thoughts and minds scattered like leaves in the wind." You see, just to sit there in adoration, in prayer, in Mary, and have your mind all over the place, that's not what is being talked about. It's not the outer. What's being talked about is the inner communion, not the outer form, you see. And that young man who was saying Om there, that was just outer. He didn't have the inner communion that was necessary to make appropriate what he was doing. And so let's keep that in mind. But just here to finish, the second point I thought about is really this story of Martha and Mary is an allegory of what's going on in our own consciousness. Mary is that call of the higher self, call of the soul within us. And Martha's that call of the restless mind, the ego maybe, to involve itself in everything outside. And these two, and it wants, Mary, come, this is what we need to do. But Christ is saying, no, she has chosen the higher path. And it's a way we approach life. The intuition versus the intellect, and the mind and the intellect try to know this world from the outside in. Where in inner communion, the intuition, we learn from the inside out. We attune inwardly, and from that inner guidance, we know. Outwardly, we just know the form. But if you really want to know something, you have to get in tune with it inwardly. And that's the part that Mary chose. She chose the better part. And that's the path of the disciple, to be in tune with the Guru. Many people, they talk about Master Yogananda. Oh, he was such a nice man. He was great powers. He's so kind, and all true, but all outward qualities when they talk about. But it's just form. If we just approach it on that, to really know the Guru, it's not to know his personality. It's to know inwardly and to attune ourselves inwardly what the Guru really represented. And that was inwardly. And so as a disciple, that's our number one duty. And then secondly, we take that understanding and we put it into motion and we share it. And then that's what Mary did. She was taking the role of the true disciple and attuning herself to the Guru. And then, who knows what happens in the second half of that story? Maybe she then joined her sister. I don't know. Could have very well been appropriate to do that. But if she did, she took that attunement with her and put it into action. And then this way, that's what love really is sharing that attunement in action, that bliss of God with other people. And that's what it meant when Christ says, Mary has chosen the better part, not just the outer, which Martha had chosen. The outer service without that inner attunement is just action, karmic action. Could be good, could be helpful, but it's not the highest potential that we should aim for as disciples. God bless all of you. God bless all of you. So now